everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the 4th annual Forest and Fire Learning Series. This is going to be our 5th and final installment of the Forest and Fire Learning Series. And we've got a few minutes before 6 p.m. So as we get settled in here, feel free to let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. And let us know if you have any questions, general questions for our speakers or about the event itself in the comment section. And in the meantime, before we really get rolling here, I'll let you know that this learning series, again, as I said, is the fourth year that we've hosted this event. And this is where we invite researchers and land managers, county planners, community members to share their knowledge about wildfire and its impacts, both positive and negative, on our air, on our water, on our forests, and on our communities. The Forest and Fire Learning Series began in 2018 in preparation for what was looking to be a very dry season. And indeed, most of the Southwest was in the midst of exceptional drought at that time. And Mountain Studies Institute, along with several local partners, came together to bring the community insightful information about wildfire and spark conversation about the state of our forests and how we can begin to address some of the challenges facing our natural resources and the safety of our communities. So we're so excited to be here again this evening. Thank you again very much for joining us. And as I kind of get some screen sharing going on here. All right, cool. So here we go. Forest and Fire Learning Series. And my name, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Emily Swindell. I work with the Forest team here at Mountain Studies Institute, alongside Dana Hayward, the Forest team's partnership coordinator at Mountain Studies Institute, who is working behind the scenes to help this event move along more smoothly. So we're really happy to be here this evening and so excited to hear from our speakers this year. So as I mentioned before, tonight we'll be diving into, for our 5th and final live stream event, diving into wildfire preparedness and seasonal outlooks. And so at any time, again, feel free to type any comments or questions you have into the chat, and we'll open it up to those questions after all of our speakers have presented. Before we get to that, however, let's see, before we get to that, here we are. I want to say thank you so much to all of our sponsors who have made this event possible. Really, it's a big effort with a lot of local partners coming together to bring you this information. So a very big thank you to all of you out there who have made this possible. Thank you. And a very special thank you to those who have provided in-kind donations for our free giveaway, which include our partners at San Juan Mountains Association, Durango Outdoor Exchange, Maria's Bookshop, and Pagosa Mountain Sports. So to be eligible to win a combination of one of these awesome prizes, you must be 18 years of age or older, fill out our very brief survey that is included in the comment section, and like or follow Mountain Studies Institute on Facebook or YouTube before tomorrow. And if you're a lucky winner, we'll contact you directly and give you 1 week to respond to claim your prizes. All right, let's see. So I'm kind of doing some technical, looking at where we are here. I want to make sure real quick that we are live streaming. So I'm gonna put this up real quick and make sure that we are going live. Oh, yep, I think we are live. Yep, we're good to go. Thank you so much. Again, this has always been such an interesting challenge as we are not IT savvy. I think most people understand too with everything going virtual that we're all working, we're working to become IT wizards here. It's always a work in progress. So, so now that we are live streaming and confirmed live streaming, let's get on with it, shall we? Our first speaker this evening is Alex Graf, Montezuma County Coordinator for Wildfire Adapted Partnership. Alex joined Wildfire Adapted Partnership as the Montezuma County Coordinator in April of 2019. He grew up in the foothills of the Catskill Mountains in New York State and attended Bard College in the Hudson Valley, where he graduated with a BA in Environmental Studies. He has lived in Southwest Colorado for the past 4 years and is deeply invested in helping others learn to live with wildfire. All right, thanks so much, Alex. I'll go ahead and let you take over the screen.
Okay, thanks so much, Emily. And great. And can you see that? Everybody see that all right?
Yeah, you should be good. Yeah, you should be good to go, Alex. Thank you.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Emily. Yeah, it's always fun on Zoom, getting into Zoom land and working through the technical stuff, but we're here now. So yeah, I want to thank everybody at MSI for putting this event together. It's a really excellent opportunity. And so I'm excited to share my bit on Wildfire Adapted Partnership. And it's really excellent to have Jem Boone here as well, who'll be talking to us a little bit later in the evening. So today, I just want to kind of give everybody out there in internet land a kind of rundown of Wildfire Adapted Partnership, who we are if you don't know us, and our kind of seasonal programs that we have available in 2021. So let's get on with it. So who is Wildfire Adapted Partnership? Some folks might not know, and this is for you. If you don't know, we're a small crew of 4 people working across the 5 southwest counties of Colorado. And we're kind of in the business of wildfire preparedness, trying to get folks, landowners, community members ready for wildfire, whether that be through mitigation work, education, preparing for evacuations. So these are kind of all topics we cover. And so 4 folks, myself, I cover Montezuma and Dolores County, Charlie Landsman, who covers La Plata and San Juan County, Bill Tremarco, who's over in Archuleta and a little bit of Hinsdale, and then Ashley Downing, who's our director. And here's our mission statement up on the corner. I will just briefly read off of the PowerPoint, which I know some people don't like, but Wildfire Adapted Partnership inspires, educates, and enables individuals and communities to protect lives and property from wildfire. So preparing for wildfire. As I think it's probably going to be brought up later on in our evening, we all know, hopefully, that it's not a matter of if a wildfire is going to happen, it's more of a matter of when. Here in Southwest Colorado, living in forests that are adapted for fire or not adapted for fire, living in an arid climate. So we're in the business of helping people prepare for that inevitability. And one last kind of pitch before I get into our programs. Although we only have 4 staff, we really rely on this pretty large group of volunteers that really is the backbone of our organization. We have currently 140 plus, we call them neighborhood ambassadors, working across 100 communities in the 5 southwest counties of Colorado. Here's a map kind of with these red blotches, just showing you the kind of expansiveness of where folks are located. And ambassadors are folks working in their subdivisions, in their neighborhoods, in their neck of the woods to kind of spread the good word of wildfire preparedness. And if it weren't for them, really, I don't know where we would be in terms of an organization, and certainly we would be in a different world in terms of preparedness kind of on the local scale. So I always want to shout out those folks. Alrighty, so now I'm going to kind of transition to just tell everybody about our 2021 programs. First program, this is kind of a flagship program. We do it every single year. It's our free site assessments. And here's a photo of La Plata County Coordinator Charlie Landsman looking at a deck, which is definitely a spot of concern in terms of wildfire. So these site assessments are completely free. They're hour-long. Typically, you'll meet with your county coordinator, one of us, on your property. We'll walk the property, and we'll talk about the home ignition zone, basically, which is a way to think about structural ignitions, right? So a home catching on fire from two different vantage points, preventing that from two different vantage points. So that's thinking about embers as well as thinking about fuels. A lot of folks get really giddy when we start talking about chainsaws and fuels reduction, and that's excellent, that's important. But I always want to emphasize ember ignitions are also crucial to think about. So our free site assessment program is a great way to start to strategize how to mitigate wildfire risk on your property. They're completely free. It takes about an hour or so. You'll do it with myself, Charlie, or Bill, and you can sign up for that on our website. Kind of as a tag along to that program is our Defensible Space Cost Share program, which we do have this year. The one caveat to this is it's kind of specific to geography. So what is this program? It's an incentive program. It's a cost share program to help landowners accomplish mitigation work. This is fuels reduction, so cutting down trees, limbing trees, to do that mitigation work around their home, around their structures, along egresses, along driveways. It's a reimbursement program to offset the cost. Now, it is important to remember that it's based on geography. We have a couple of grants, and they're all based on location. So the best way to figure out if you might be eligible for one of these programs, one of these reimbursement programs, is to sign up for a site assessment. Reach out to us. I'll have contact info on the last slide. Contact your county coordinator. But it all starts with a site assessment, and it's the type of thing we kind of have to go through our process. It's not just you send us the bill and we reimburse. We have to kind of write up paperwork, make sure we're accomplishing good defensible space. So yeah, sign up on our website, site assessments. That's where to start that process. Next, we have, again, it's back, our chipper rental rebate program. So this is kind of, if you have slash piles on your property and you want to rearrange them, put them into the form of chips, then we have a rebate for renting a chipper. It only goes April 1st to September 30th. So we have a little bit of a window there. You're eligible for a 50% reimbursement. An individual at least is up to $250. And if you want to do like an HOA community chipping day, there's a bit higher of a total that we can reimburse you for. So those are the three main programs we have. And I also kind of want to pitch a series that we have going similar to this very series. We're going to be running a number of workshops all throughout the month of May, which is Wildfire Preparedness Month. Even though I think April is a good time to prepare for wildfire too these days. Nonetheless, yeah, so we're doing a community wildfire preparedness workshop series, 2 days in May. This is open to the community. We want to keep it to local folks. 2 dates, May 5th, Wednesday, 6 to 7 p.m. That's going to be an introduction to what is a fire adapted community. So kind of taking a bigger scale look at how to live with wildfire on the community level. Second one's going to be Monday, May 24th from 12 to 1 p.m. And this is going to delve into the home ignition zone. So kind of nuts and bolts of how you do mitigation on your property, how you defend from embers by retrofitting potentially or home hardening. We do kind of give a home ignition zone course that is a little bit more lengthy. at other times, but this is a really compressed version, just 1 hour. Both virtual via Zoom, no surprise there, and you can sign up on our website. So these are open to the community. We're holding 2 more that are going to be tailored a bit more towards realtors. So this is our Colorado Real Estate Continuing Education Credit Course, and this is focused just on the home ignition zone. It's an hour-long course for realtors, professionals in that world. You get a Colorado Real Estate Continuing Education credit for participating. 2 dates here, Tuesday, May 11th, 1 to 2 p.m., Thursday, May 20th, 10 to 11 a.m. Again, virtual via Zoom, and you can sign up on our website. That's enough self-promotion for now. I just want to give one last pitch. I tried to keep my presentation a little bit short because personally, I think what Jem is going to talk about next is probably way more important than anything I can say. But this is kind of my last call. If you're living in a neighborhood and maybe you don't know if you have an ambassador, or you know there's wildfire risk, there's a lot of fuels, crowded roads with vegetation, or you don't think you have defensible space, or you're just concerned about wildfire, reach out to us and sign up for a site visit. But also, I think it's worth considering becoming an ambassador if you kind of want to make a difference in your community. If you have a knack for talking to your neighbors, so like I already mentioned, our ambassador program is really the backbone of our organization. And I would highly encourage folks to get involved if you have any interest in preparing for wildfire, to say the least, I guess there. So that's kind of all I got today for you. Just that rundown of programs, introduction to Wildfire Adapted Partnership, if you don't know who we are. I have my contact information up on the top, and then kind of just our generic info at email. Feel free to reach out anyway. Again, I'm the Montezuma County coordinator, so I typically deal with landowners, community members over there, but I'm more than happy to chat on the phone with anybody who gives me a call. Otherwise, if you want to get redirected to county coordinator in your county, feel free to drop us a line at the email or the phone number. And that's kind of all I've got today. Again, I kind of wanted to pitch the ambassador program because we're going to have an ambassador talk to you in just a few minutes. So thanks so much again to MSI. Thanks to everybody who's listening. It's going to be a fire season, so I think now is the time to prepare. Drop us a line. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. That was really great. And thank you for sharing all the great work that you and the team at Wildfire Adapted Partnership do for the community. And we'll be sure to include all of that contact information in the comment section after we're done here. We'll go ahead and wrap it up, but we'll include that for sure. Awesome. And as Alex said, our next speaker is a neighborhood ambassador with a really incredible story. And I will go to, there we are. All right, great. So up next is Jim Boone, who is a FireWise ambassador and a member of the East Canyon community. Jim has been a flight attendant with American Airlines for 34 years, and her husband is a pilot and also works for American Airlines. They purchased their property in Elk Steam Ranch in 1998, began building their house in 2009, and made Colorado their permanent home in 2010. Jim became a FireWise ambassador in 2012 and has served on Elk Steam Ranch Property Owners Association in a number of capacities. In her leisure time, she enjoys her grandchildren the most, and which is followed by hiking, cooking, photography, and entertaining family and friends who frequently visit Colorado. All right, Jim, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and let you and Alex take over. Awesome.
Okay. All right. Everyone good? Okay. Well, thank you, Emily, for the introduction. Again, we bought our 36-acre parcel in 1998, but we lived in a different state. We didn't move permanently to Colorado till our house was finished in 2010. We started mitigating efforts in 2005 after we bought a truck and a fifth wheel trailer, which allowed us to stay on our property for longer periods of time and get a lot more work done. At the time that we bought our property, it was solid trees and lots of underbrush. I mean, you could barely walk through it. You basically had to crawl. Back then, we did all our work with hand saws, chainsaws, and many burn piles. It was hard work, but it was very worth it. Each day would start with, hey, what trees shall we save today? We'd start by clearing around larger and more prominent trees and then work out from there, limbing up as we went. Little by little, our efforts paid off and the clearing became even easier when affordable mastication equipment companies came along. That really changed things. The acreage they would cover in 2 hours would literally take us 2 months to finish. It was amazing. Next slide. Every year at our annual association meeting, the board would make it a priority to talk about the importance of fire mitigation and have informational brochures available to everyone. Our CC&Rs already had restrictions in place when building, such as fireproof roofing materials, closed eaves, etc. And now we had FireWise guidance. Defensible space around the home of at least 100 feet was always encouraged. Next. There were not many homes built in the canyon yet, and we were told by the local fire department that they'd been quoted as saying they might not even come in our canyon if they cannot safely do so. That was a great wake-up call, so more work began. Our community adopted our first CWPP in 2008. It was the first subdivision level CWPP completed in Montezuma County and Southwest Colorado. Roadways were a top priority in the beginning due to the numerous choke points. Fuel breaks were made along the roadways, which were 150 feet from the center line, and the association provided funding through a cost share program, which was 50% reimbursement up to $4,000 per lot, which really helped. It was a very successful community effort. Next slide. In the next few years, more homes were built and the mitigation efforts continued. Grants were used for more funding and the association continued with the cost share program. The fire department, we hoped, felt a lot safer. As we all know, like Alex mentioned, it's not if a fire will come, it's when. Next slide, please. The Weber fire started on June 22nd, 2012 and burned over 10,000 acres in our community. Our neighbor, Phil Walters, who was a FireWise ambassador at the time, had initiated the phone tree. It was a pre-evacuation order at first, and unfortunately, we were not home when the evacuation was ordered. When we did get home, we were only allowed 5 minutes to come in and grab some items. I had my checklist, so I followed it, and it went very quickly. I'll discuss more about the checklist shortly. The structure defense team had already been to our house and took care of the outside items on the checklist. The fire eventually came right over the ridgeline, right across from our house and into our canyon. The fire crew had told us afterwards that they watched the fire breach our canyon from our deck. Pretty scary. Prior to having our CWPP, remember the fire crews had said they might not even have entered our canyon, but instead they did, and they were able to stop the fire from spreading. They used our main road, Road 46, as a boundary line, and they lit many backfires. As a result, no homes or structures were lost in our community. We were evacuated for 10 days during that fire. We learned a lot from the Weber fire. We knew our mitigation plan had helped save homes, and we still had more to do. But little did we know we had more to learn. The first big rains after the fire brought lots of flooding and mudslides. The flooding caused significant damage to our roads and ponds. Boy, did we get an education on what to do following a fire. We had to do a lot of research on what steps to take to try and slow down and redirect large amounts of water. As a community, we learned about gabions and debris fences. Next slide. Volunteers in our canyon even learned how to build them. We had small single culverts and had to replace them with larger ones. In some spots, we had to install 2 side by side. We had 2 ponds in the canyon as well, and both filled in with mud and debris from the fire runoff. Ours, unfortunately, was one of them. We wanted to reclaim the pond once the floods had subsided, which actually took like 2 years, because not only was it a beautiful pond and a valuable resource for wildlife and grazing, but our pond had been frequently used by firefighters with their helicopters over the years, Weber Fire included. We applied for different grants to offset the cost of reclaiming our pond, which was eventually successful. More mitigation efforts continued. Next slide. Mitigating around the front gate, individual projects, and chipping rebates were used as well. We also held an evacuation drill after more people moved into the neighborhood. Our association was really good at ensuring contact information, like phone lists, were kept updated, and would encourage everyone to sign up for the Nixle alert system. Wildfire Adapted Partnership ambassadors continued to educate with presentations at all of our annual association meetings and made sure to have plenty of literature available, as well as guest speakers. Next slide. The East Canyon Fire. It was June 14, 2020, and my husband and I had been gone for a couple of weeks due to a family emergency. We had started the morning calling a brush cutter company that was supposed to have shredded our 25 piles of new brush while we were gone. I was already worried about a fire starting because it had been so dry the prior month. We spent the rest of the morning outside to mow some tall grass and put up some temporary fencing to keep some cattle grazing away from the house. When my friend, who lives 8 miles away, phoned me to ask if I was home. She then proceeded to tell me she sees smoke over our way and she had just called 911. I looked out the window to the back, and literally right behind our house above the ridge line, I saw the smoke. Not much later, I saw the flames. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was just out there working. I quickly thanked her for the call, and then I called 911 to make sure they had all of the correct gate codes for our community. My husband was still outside in the front yard and he hadn't noticed the fire. I yelled out, "Fire," and pointed to it. I asked him to make sure the hoses and sprayers were still attached and to prepare the outside. I then started calling neighbors while simultaneously preparing for the evacuation. Even though we hadn't gotten an evacuation call yet from Nixle, I wasn't waiting. Everyone was reminded to meet at our pre-planned evacuation spot. So here's where the checklist comes in. Next slide, please. If you have time, by all means, complete this checklist. In both evacuations, unfortunately, we did not have time to complete this checklist. So I keep a bare minimum evacuation checklist on our garage door, so I don't have to think about what to do. When under a stressful situation, we all know it's harder to think straight. So having a list keeps you focused. It's also the last thing I see before leaving the home. Next slide. So here's our minimal evacuation checklist. Load our grab and go bag. And these are items for 3 days like medicine, clothes, toiletry, pet leashes, etc. During fire season, you should always have this bag ready to go. Load our personal items. These are items which are most important to you, possibly irreplaceable. Mine, for example, are a couple of old photo albums, a special box of Christmas ornaments, an old recipe book. Make sure you have your laptops and phones amongst a few other things. Also, make sure you write down where they're located. Again, you don't want to have to think about these things when you're under stress. Close all windows. This is to protect your house from any smoke damage. Turn off our crawl space fan. Bring in deck cushions. Outside, my husband was busy turning off the propane, moving the grill away from the house. Any cushions outside as well, throw them away from the house. Make sure your hoses and sprayers are attached to bibs. Next slide, please. This should be done in fire season. Leave doors unlocked. I do this for the firefighters in case they need a place to stay. While calling neighbors, I made sure to ask if they needed any help, especially ones with horses or pets. One neighbor who was not home at the time had asked me to get her dog. I also asked some neighbors to call others on the list, especially if they live next door to one another, because then they can help each other. This helped me save some time. It took us literally less than 5 minutes to complete our checklist, and I left to pick up our neighbor's dog. I was driving back from our neighbor's house when the Nixle alert came in telling us to evacuate. We were already one step ahead of the game, thank goodness. There are 15 homes in our subdivision at the time of the fire, and 9 neighbors were home. Almost everyone met at our evacuation spot, except those with livestock who went to the county fairgrounds, which was already predetermined. The others who were not home did check in with us as I had left messages, and everyone was accounted for. We all then went to register with the fire department so we could get updates. We were evacuated for 4 days and then on pre-evac notice for another 4 days. We watched helplessly as the fire burned on top of the ridgeline where 5 homes in our community are located. We really thought they were gone for sure. Amazingly, the firefighters, along with air support, were able to save all 5 homes. The East Canyon fire burned just over 2,900 acres, and happy to say no homes or structures were lost in our canyon. Crucial planning steps and advice. If you can take away anything from hearing my story, it would be this. If you haven't created defensible space around your house, do so now. The firefighters told us how impressed they were with our fire mitigation. They said we did a great job and they felt completely safe protecting our houses. In fire season, go ahead and have hoses and sprayers attached to all outside bibs if possible. This will help save you time and help firefighters better protect your home. Make sure you have that evacuation checklist posted. I can't stress this enough. Place it where you'll see it before leaving the house. If you're not at home, a neighbor might even be able to help you. They could follow your abbreviated list if there's time. Make sure phone trees are updated. And please, please sign up for the Nixle alert system. So why do you think our East Canyon community had success with 2 wildfires in our neighborhood? Well, I believe it's by being proactive, having a CWPP in place, educating property and homeowners by having guest speakers and presentations at all of our annual meetings, because just handing out literature is not enough. Encouraging mitigation, funding projects with cost shares and grants, and most importantly, volunteering. Help your neighbors with projects. It's what makes a great community. So I thank you for your time, and I hope my experience can better prepare you if a fire ever comes your way. Thanks for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jim, for sharing your story with us, your experience, and your personal grab and go checklist in your garage. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So our next speaker and our final speaker to wrap up the learning series this year is Brad Petruska, who's the Fuels Program Manager for the San Juan National Forest. I'm going to go ahead and give you a brief bio for Brad real quick. So Brad started his career where he lives in Dolores, Colorado. He has worked for the BLM, the Forest Service, and National Park Service in Colorado, Utah, and Arkansas. After working on wildland fire modules, Brown found his passion in both what was formerly wildland fire use as well as prescribed fire. In 2013, he switched to the fuel side of the fire world, first as a fire management specialist with the Colorado BLM Southwest District in Dolores, Colorado, then as the fuels program manager for the same fire unit for 4 years. In 2019, Brad moved over to the San Juan National Forest as the fuels program manager. During the summer, Brad is the primary incident commander for the San Juan Type 3 team and also supports incidents nationally with strategic direction and long-term analysis, as well as operational roles. Brad is a firm believer that fire is needed where we live to sustain the things we love about the area, and that we need to increase how much we're comfortable living with. In his spare time, Brad raises 2 daughters and a son with his wife, Molly, outside of Dolores, Colorado, and tries to spend as much time as possible on rivers and bike trails in the Southwest. So thanks so much, Brad, for joining us this evening, and I'll go ahead and hand it on over to you.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks for having me to Mountain Studies Institute. My presentation is kind of twofold. First, we're going to look at the fire season outlook. As you can see from the first screen, there's a whole lot of red on the west slope of Colorado, so it's kind of a clue where we're going with that. Then we're going to talk about bigger picture, where we're going to go as a bunch of communities and people who love this place as far as living with fire. So without further ado, we'll get into this. There you go. So 2020, we're going to talk a little bit about where we were and where we're going to go. 2020 wasn't great in a lot of ways, but precipitation and evaporative demand, it was actually really bad. It was a really terrible water year thanks to a lot of factors. Early snowmelt came off fast, complete failure of the southwest monsoon, which usually resets our fire danger, and drought creeped up to its highest level, D4, which is exceptional. So as we entered winter, we were still in exceptional drought. That happened to us in 2018-19 with a lot different results in 2019 than where we are now. And that drought has barely improved throughout the winter. So here's just a little scatter plot showing a bunch of past years. 2020 is highlighted there in red. Definitely the driest and the second or third warmest since, I don't know, 1979, somewhere in there. Not a great year. So usually when we're talking water, we look at the water year from October 1st to September 30th. That's a water year. We've had 2 pretty poor water years in a row. So what happens when we start looking at other significant fire seasons we've had and the year before them? It turns out this year we are the farthest behind, even when comparing to 2002, 2018, 2013. There was more water in those years the year before than there has been now. So we're missing about a little over a quarter of 2-year precipitation. So that is a lot of water that hasn't been hitting us for a while. Snowpack wasn't miserable. You know, we topped out about 80% as a basin as a whole. That was really boosted up by the area outside of Pagosa Springs. The didn't fare as well. So our snowpack is still the 4th lowest since 1987. And then the precipitation you can see on this lower screen if I turn on a laser pointer, see if that works for me. Yep. So precipitation here, it's in the red. That means below the 10th percentile. That's where we're sitting. We did get a little bit of moisture, but it was not nearly enough to impact our long-term deficits. There's only been 2 drier water years than 2021 since 1987, and that was 2002 and 2018. And again, averaging all the basins together doesn't really help. So precipitation by basin, and by basin, I mean the watersheds that incorporate these larger streams that flow through them. So the Animas, really similar to 2013, just this river, but remember, we're missing a whole bunch of water last year as well. Dolores, same story, 2013. The Mancos La Plata is actually probably the worst off. So sorry, Jim, your basin is again very, very dry with its closest analog year being 2002. The upper San Juan, while it did receive more water, is still drier than average. Sorry about that. My son came in and wants paper from the printer. So we're going to go to the next slide. Figure that out. I believe I'm frozen. So let's see here.
We can hear you good, Brad.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Thanks.
Going on. So stream flows. I like to look at stream flows a lot. Everything in the West, including fire activity, is driven by water availability. How much water you have in the stream flow reflects how much water is already melted into your soils, your fuels, all that sort of stuff. So here is a couple of charts just showing the cumulative amount of water since October 1st that's flowed through a lot of major streams in the area. The only one, well, there's 2 that aren't the worst, and that'd be the Piedra and the San Juan. Every other one is setting record low flows. So the Mancos, Los Pinos, Dolores, and Animas. The Mancos is far and away the worst off at Toyac, I can't find any evidence it's had any water flow through it since October 1st. So very anomalously dry. Looking out a little further, so we're in a little drier stretch. We got a little bit of range between a quarter. That seems to be about what we're going to get. Might be a little disturbance coming through Monday, Tuesday, but nothing real significant as far as moisture. So significantly above normal temps in the 1 month and certainly the 3-month period, with odds favoring below normal precipitation. So not great. And again, it did rain. You know, on the west side, certainly less than when you get into Archuleta County over here. Amounts generally between a 1/10 and a 1/4 inch. So just about a wetting rain is what we got out of that last storm. The good thing about that is that is going to help us with a little bit of prescribed fire. The BLM had about 300 acres they got done today. Pagosa Springs is looking to do about 500 on Saturday. And then come Tuesday, Dolores will be looking anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 to 4,000, depending on how long we can milk this precipitation for what it's worth. So I talk about fire danger a lot. This gets a little technical, but here's kind of just a statistics charts of how dry our fuels are as measured at a bunch of different remote weather stations that we have. So every day we get 7-day forecasts, and then observations come in from these stations. It populates our observed values. That red line you see on the top and bottom is observed. That is where we have been so far this year. The purple line is where we're forecast to go the next seven days. So the lower, we've been hitting, you know, really high levels, new maximums. In mid-April, we had that really warm and dry and windy stretch. A little bit of precip later, and then it peaked back up. And then here's where we are today. Expected to yet again go into a dry pattern. The upper's been setting maximums since about the same time period, and we expect that to continue down here. So these are models that have really good correlation with past fire activity, and that's why we use them to base a lot of our decisions as far as should we be doing prescribed fire. Is it time to bring more resources in? What should Smokey Bear's arm say? All that stuff derives from this NFDRS, National Fire Danger Rating System stuff that we use. Couple little interesting things. Fire season length. We always talk about, oh, it's fire year now. Locally, at the tail end, it's about 11 years longer when you compare 2001 to 2010 and then 2011 to 2020. We've got about an extra 11 days in that second decade than we did in the first. The onset date's a little trickier. If it's a wet year, your fire season is going to start later. If it's a dry year, it's going to start early. Not a great correlation there. So we can also do that with comparing that energy release component I was talking about. And that shows you not only is the season longer, but it's actually becoming drier as well. So this orange line is the, oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, we'll keep going. So where does that leave us? Even if it's not the worst winter we've ever had, it's not great. So we're definitely expecting above normal potential for fires this year. That's not to say we guarantee there's going to be several 100,000 acres burned. It's just that the conditions are really favorable for larger than an average season fires to occur. So I've got some scenarios up there. Worst case would be if our monsoon fails again. That'll keep fire potential elevated throughout the year until we get snow, just like what we had in 2020. So far, there's no indication that the monsoon is going to be as poor as it was last year, but it hasn't been great the past 4 years. So I do just kind of question how reliable that monsoon is anymore. Most likely the monsoon will happen. It's happened, 16 out of the last 20 years, roughly. So there's still good odds that'll happen. We're still going to have a hot and dry May and June. Fire potential is still higher in those months than average. And then you got to talk about the least likely. Maybe it'll rain a whole bunch through May and June. Very unlikely based on every available metric. Can't rule it out entirely. That'd be great if that did happen, but just super unlikely. So we always talk about, we talk about why are we here, right? Why do we have this problem with fire that we have? Why does Jim have to evacuate her home twice in a decade? All that kind of stuff. That's a really complicated question. There's not one answer to it. All of the forest, pretty much across the entire US, evolved with fire. Our area is not an exception. In the San Juan National Forest, where I'm really familiar with, fire is the main disturbance agent. So when we talk about forest disturbance, we talk about fire ecology. We're talking about what keeps that ecosystem regulated and balanced. In the Western United States, for the most part, that was fire, especially in the San Juan National Forest. So pre-European settlement, late 1800s or so, fires could basically self-regulate. So lightning would ignite them. They'd burn for a while, they'd hit a previous fire, and that area had been burned previously. So we're talking lower intensity, a lot larger area than what is currently burned. And that's what I mean by self-regulating. When Europeans showed up, started settling the area, we changed a lot of things. So grazing, logging, built roads, built railroads, plowed farmlands, landscape fragmentation, and we started suppressing fires all over the place. So not just one thing, but a bunch of different things stacked on top of each other. This is really a legacy of everybody that came before us. So that's why we're here. I've got this quote on here from Chernobyl. It's a really good quote. It's about the truth. Every lie we tell incurs a debt to the truth. Sooner or later, that debt is paid. So it's this guy describing very well what's going on in the Western United States. This map that's showing up here, something called fire debt or fire deficit. How many cycles of fire has this landscape missed? You can see that the majority of the lower and mid elevations across the forest, about 6 times. You would have expected that would have burned 6 times more than what it has, thanks to all those factors that I listed right here. So cumulatively, the San Juan is missing about 3 million acres of fire just in the past 120 years or so. So that's how big the problem is. The San Juan, for reference, is only 1.9 million acres. So we're missing almost twice as much fire as the forest is large. That might give you a scale of how big this issue is. And it's not just here, it's all over the Western US. So that shows, without any people doing anything to the landscape, how often that might have been expected to burn. Vast majority of the forest is in that 15 to 20 year mark. And that might even be a little high for a lot of our lower elevation areas in the ponderosa pine. If you do a little math on this, this shows you about 38,000 acres per year should have burned across the San Juan in an average year. Obviously, averaging isn't great. Some years there might be none. Some years there might be hundreds of thousands of acres. But if we think of a 38,000 acre fire right now, that would be a really big event for us. So not only are we having a lot less fire, but the type of fire that we're seeing across a lot of these areas can be really different as well. So where is this going to go? There is not an option around here that involves not living with fire or having smoke in your skies. We've seen this certainly the past 3 years in August, even though it wasn't from local fires. 2018 it was to some extent. We still had fires going on in August then, but we see those smoky skies, we see those monsoons failing. There's a couple of choices we can do. We can keep doing the same thing we're doing, and we're gonna keep having really big, really expensive, and really damaging fires. It's gonna happen repeatedly. There's not gonna be a lot firefighters can do. We know there's conditions that exist that people are not effective in. Looking at this chart right here, the vast majority of acres across the San Juan burn in this little box on the top right of this chart. So this is just simply how dry fuels are and how windy it is. So it's a very small subset of days that account for a very large amount of the acres burned. There's another option. We can increase how much we're actually doing to the landscape and how comfortable we are living with some form of smoke and fire. And we got to do it by a lot. This includes things like prescribed fire, timber sales, fuels projects, prescribed fire, and then also letting lightning fires where they ignite in a good spot at a good time of year, encouraging those to grow. Because if they're burning under the lower end conditions, we're going to be happier with that outcome than waiting for the big fire to come. Losses are still going to happen under each of these, especially option A. Option B, you're still going to have losses. You're still going to have things we would view as bad outcomes, but it will be lower than the scenario we're currently living through right now. How to get there? That's a really hard question. To get to A is really easy. We're doing that. So we just keep doing it, and it won't take that long. This year's going to be above average. We'll probably have large fires. So that's how you get to option A. Option B is a ton harder. It's not just the Forest Service. It's not just private landowners. It's all of us. Our elected officials, the agencies, the media, the public, every one of us. It's going to take us all working together and kind of getting accustomed to what a new normal might be. So Dr. Mark Finney just had a good paper come out. Emergency wildfire response is insufficient to protect natural resources and communities. We can always say, well, we're going to evolve, we're going to improve our technology. Technology that enforces the wildfire suppression paradigm will yield only marginal benefits. So there is a benefit to things like having another helicopter, having another air tanker. The issue is, as your fires grow larger, that does not provide as much of a benefit as managing fires in a little more strategic and long-term direction. Investments in proactive use of wildland fire are needed to sustain urban values and natural resources. So it's all of these things that we intuitively know, that we always talk about, just wrapped into one big, really hard problem for all of us to solve. But I'm really happy to have been able to speak with you tonight, and I look forward to any questions that you might have.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for that great presentation, Brad. We do have a question up here, and this first one is for Jim. Jim, were you always fire aware, or was that something that you learned after calling Colorado your home?
Oh, no, I definitely learned it before. I mean, I grew up camping in the mountains of Arizona. And so I always knew I wanted to move to the forest, but you were going to have to do mitigation to make sure your house doesn't burn down. And when we bought our property in East Canyon, Philip Walters was just a great resource because he was already a Firewise ambassador. And we started, mitigating as soon as we could. I mean, we didn't know where we were putting our house yet, and we didn't know what our future held with when we were building, but we basically spent our first 10 years just working on our property to get ready. Oops. Where did it go?
All right, great. Thank you, Jim. Thank you for that. We do have another question here. So this next question, I believe, is for Brad. And the question is, based on past years, how accurate have the NFDRS fire models been?
Thanks. So when we look back in time, that's exactly what we do. We try to correlate large fire currents. So how much did a fire grow in a given day to what were the NFDRS outputs? There's a whole suite of variables, correlation progressions and all that to figure it out. We do that ahead of time, and we base that on history. So we purposely pick the most correlated and the best matches that we can, and then we use that information to project into the future what's likely to happen and how should we be staffing, how many widgets do we need, how many engines, how many to figure out what's the best indicator for all of this stuff. In the past, we've used a different fuel model G, which has been super well correlated. When the 416 fire started in 2018, we had about 7 days lead time that was going to be a very bad day. It turned out we had an ignition, and that was a very bad day. So it did really well then. We're using models that have a little more nuance now as far as how they calculate different inputs to them. So far, those models actually correlate better. So I feel like our handle on fire danger is improving even as we go forward. As far as accuracy, it's kind of hard because if you don't have a fire, you don't have a data point, it's hard to prove the counterfactual. But when we do have fires, we feel pretty prepared for them based on the NFDRS outputs that we get.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Brad. We have another question that just came up, and I think this one could be directed towards Jim and or Alex. What advice do you have for using varied resources to, quote unquote, beat the clock with mitigation on your property? Even if you're trying to get the work done, a fire could happen at any time. Any advice on how to make it happen more quickly?
I can take that, Gem, unless you want to take it.
Oh, well, yeah, I had typed in, I mean, hiring a brush cutter company is by far the fastest way you're going to try to get the majority of mitigation done, especially in large areas. And then you can get a pole saw and limb up trees. But to us, that was amazing when those companies came around.
Yeah. And I think the only thing I would add is, I think in this question, it's, getting at the urgency, responding to the scope of what we're dealing with from Brad's presentation, right? And there's a sense of, okay, we got to do it right now. And that's true. But with mitigation work, you're going to be at it for a long time, basically, right? To me, mitigation isn't something that you do once and then it's over. It's kind of like a relationship you have with your property to make sure that every year, there's going to be fire, there's going to be smoke. What are we doing? So, one bite at a time. Quick is good, but using, just like the question asks, right? Like varied resources. Yeah, use all the resources at your disposal. Another piece of advice is start work from your structure and work outwards. You don't want to be working off in, hundreds of feet away from your structure to do mitigation work. You want to prioritize your structure and your egress, your access, your driveways. So yeah, just a couple other points to add there.
Absolutely. I'd like to add something in there, Alex. So we did not have a structure. We didn't even know where we were going to put our house in the beginning. And a lot of properties in our community don't have structures. There's actually more property owners than homeowners. And I tell them to start mitigating now and make, groupings of trees and figure out where you possibly would put a driveway and then start clearing out from there. We built half our driveway for 5 years before we started our house. And we worked from there upward.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for tackling that question together. I think Brad has something to add to that as well. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I was just going to hop in. If you have a home or an improvement already built, there's this concept called the home ignition zone, focusing on that first 30 feet of whatever is between your house, 30 feet within that and your home is going to give you a really big payoff. So that would be how to start eating that elephant if you already have a home there. But Alex and Jim totally have great points too. So a lot of different ways to it.
Awesome. Great. So our next question is, how do community perceptions of smoke and fire change or become a regular part of the conversation when a wildfire ambassador is working in the community? So I think this one is for you, Jim.
Sure. Having an ambassador in the community is such a positive thing, because at your annual meetings or just meeting your neighbors, you can spread the news. A lot of people don't want to have to go outside of their community to get information. Everybody's busy. But when we have get-togethers, we have many conversations about, what we can do to help other people if they want to get started. And it just became a main topic at all of our annual meetings, for sure. with all the literature handed out, and the ambassadors can help put on presentations, which I think help tremendously.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably biased too in this question. You know, I think perceptions of smoke and fire change drastically when there's somebody just like Jem is talking about in the community, kind of reframing the role of fire and smoke in our ecosystem and reframing the idea that there's a way to live potentially with fire as a community. I'm biased again, but I think the conversation changes a lot.
Absolutely. All right. I think we have one last question here. And the question is, I think this one is for Brad. Are there any previous years that can be compared to what models are showing so far this year?
2013, 2012, 2018, and 2002. Those are the most similar analog years to where we are right now, where we came from, and where we're expected to go. So those are probably pretty memorable years for a lot of us. They were very dry and featured above normal wildfire activity.
Wow. All right. Well, that was our, we're going to have that be our last question for the evening. So I want to say thank you so much to all of you out there for joining us this evening. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. And of course, thank you so much to Jim and Alex and Brad for bringing us all of their experience and their expertise and for sharing that with our community. I would like to remind you before you leave, please, to fill out our survey. So let's see, here we go. So that's our Forest and Fire Learning Series. So please fill out our survey, especially if you would like an opportunity to win a combination of one of these awesome prizes that have been donated to us by San Juan Mountains Association, Durango Outdoor Exchange, Marie's Bookshop, Pagosa Mountain Sports, and Mountain Studies Institute. You have to be 18 years of age or older, like us on Facebook, or follow us on YouTube. Yeah, fill out our survey, which is in the comment section of this live stream. And even if you don't want to win one of these prizes, we'd really appreciate it if you filled out our survey, since it helps us to kind of calibrate how we're doing and figure out wildfire topics to bring you in the future based on your feedback. So I want to give another very big thank you to all of our sponsors out there for helping making this event possible. We really appreciate all of you. I want to go here and stop sharing my screen, and just want to take the opportunity to say thank you to Dana for working on the back end, and thank you again to our speakers, Jim, Alex, and Brad. And we appreciate all of you out there for tuning in, for asking such great questions. And we wish you a very safe, fun, and fire-aware summer. So thank you again. Bye.